Hi everyone, my name is Aja Green, and today I'm going to be talking about the Divergent trilogy series written by Veronica Roth. It's a science fiction novel taking place in the post-apocalyptic dystopia Chicago, which is my hometown, so go Cubs. Now, the Divergent series focuses on the citizens of Chicago and how they are quote-unquote the only ones left after this big war that destroys the rest of the world. So the story opens up with the main character Beatrice Pryor and her family leading up to the choosing ceremony. So in this series, the society is divided into factions, where each person is put into a faction based on their personality and social characteristics. So the 5 factions are Abnegation, who pride themselves on being selfless, humble; Amity, who are the peaceful; Candor, the honest, who can be brutally honest actually at sometimes; Erudite, the intelligent, who are focused and driven by logic; and Dauntless, the brave, who are the protectors. So the goal of this is to remove the threat of anyone exercising free will or having ideas that are independent from the government, in order to reduce tension, reduce any negative charged emotions that will lead to conflict, and basically to keep the peace so that they will not have a war like this again. Now, everyone is born into a faction, but at the age of 16, you are able to choose your own faction, so you can stay in the one you were born with or leave it all behind. So I believe the story of Divergent ties into what we call identity, because throughout the book you will find a lot of characters trying to figure out who they really are, who they're trying to be, and how who they are and what they were, and how it kind of mixes and intermingles. So identity is defined as the qualities, beliefs, personality, looks, and expression that make up a person. So our identity dictates the choices that we make. So that's i.e. the relationships we the careers we go to, and overall the paths that we choose. What I think is really interesting about identity is that a person can have multiple identities. So not in the sense of multiple personality disorder that we will see in some other movies, but understand that you have different roles throughout the day, your lifetime. You could be a mother, a teacher, a student, a lawyer, a daughter, all these roles that encompass you, and how you might act or behave around different people while in these roles. Another thing that affects identity is kind of the nature versus nurture argument, and how your upbringing or your environment can influence you, and how much of your personality is something that is really in you, implicit, and part of your genetics. The last thing about identity is that it's not a final form. Humans are always changing, developing, growing throughout our lifespan. So prior to the choosing ceremony, they have to take a test to kind of see what faction they really belong into, but again, you have that option to choose otherwise. Beatrice Pryor finds out that she is actually divergent, which means she does not fit into society's boxes, labels, or stereotypes, and that she does not fit into one faction. She actually tested for erudite, abnegation, and dauntless. So being that, our first problem with identity is now she is a threat to society and the government, because she does not fit into what they need her to fit into, because they cannot acknowledge that you can be more than just one thing. It threatens everything they believe in. So right now we can see that you have limits on who you can be, who you're allowed to be, because the government is trying to control you. That's again touching on the fact that we have multiple identities trying to stand who we are. So the day of the choosing ceremony, Trish Pryor, at age 16, who was born into abnegation, left her family and friends behind to go into dauntless. So the main idea, quote, kind of mantra of the book, which is constantly reiterated, is faction over blood. So she just wasn't just leaving her family and friends behind, she was leaving her ideals, her morals, her values, basically herself behind, because abnegation, like I said earlier, is selfless. They're humble. At some point you realize that they can only eat simple food. She didn't know what a hamburger was. They cannot look in mirrors. She really never had time to look at who she was. Versus dauntless, who the protector, the brave, they kind of like are the rebels. So she's going into a whole different lifestyle. Because of this, her and a lot of characters were seen struggling with the idea of starting over and leaving everything you knew behind and fitting into a new role. She constantly tried reaching out to her family and looking for a piece of herself in her old life. Her identity was now locked in and could not be changed, which I think is a scary thought. For me, when I was thinking about this, I know I have changed from my freshman year of college to now my senior year, and the change in the ideas and the growth are very important to development as a human. So the idea of you cannot change who you are, you cannot change your personality, you cannot change what you believe in or what you value, and that is stuck at age 16. I think that is why we see a lot of conflict in these books. It also points out how the government is trying to restrict your identity and who you are. Another point of this is in the film, there was a moment when a girl who is from Candor, who also went to Dauntless, talks about her life and how being honest and how it's a valued trait. And someone stops her and says, I don't want to hear about your old life. You're Dauntless now. So that's another idea of how there is no transfer over. You cannot use the life you used to have, what you used to know, the ideas and morals you used to value. Here, you're a whole different person. You're doing a whole different thing now. In the book, she is actually not the only one struggling with this. I think that makes the argument that oppressing someone's individuality and the right to be themselves is not easy as you think. It's actually very hard, I believe, to pretend that you are something you're not. Another character who struggled with this was Four, who turns out to be Beatrice Pryor's love interest, as he tries to denounce the entire faction system because he instead wants to embrace all the factions and he wants to pride himself in everything good about them. I believe one time in the series he says he wants to be brave, he wants to be selfless, he wants to be intelligent, he wants to be kind, he wants to be honest. And I think that makes his inner struggles harder and makes it hard in his everyday life too, because he's constantly fighting himself about who he wants to be and who he has to be. I think this makes the argument for that humans are complex and dynamic creatures. We're not simple, that we are not meant to be in boxes, we're not meant to be one thing. So I can see why I think there are a lot of characters who struggle with this, because their government is saying you are only allowed to be one thing, you are only allowed to have this one personality trait, when humans are made of so much. Because you're basically saying that if you're brave, you cannot be kind, you cannot be intelligent, you cannot pride yourselves in those, are not something you can be. So it's an instant inner struggle between all these characters. And I think in the beginning of the book, it's safe the beginning of this, when you read the book, it's safe to say that society has placed these unrealistic limits on their members' identities and who they are allowed to be. Although they are allowed to choose their factions, they are still forced on identifying with, like I said earlier, a single personality trait. In the end, Triss comes to terms with understanding that she is not ever going to fit into a single faction, and by realizing that, she comes to peace with her inner self. I believe that Triss really found her identity through the relationships with her family and friends, the difficult choices she has to make in the series. By doing that, she creates her own path and her own identity, and I believe throughout all 3 books she becomes happy with who she becomes and what she has done. But I would definitely recommend this series. It's Insurgent, Allegiant, and the third one I cannot think of. Divergent, Insurgent, Allegiant. They're very good books. I definitely recommend them. Thank you guys for watching the video, and when I post it, I'll post my discussion question as well. Thank you.